And for me, as being a part of that group, it was interesting because it solidified what I already knew in my own life, that I felt very powerfully that God was speaking to me, that He was definitely leading me in a certain direction, and despite what I saw going on around me, I needed to continue to trust Him. One woman came up to me afterwards, this is another fellow doctoral student, and she said, I just want to tell you, I will never forget the look on your face when you came up to me in the character of Caleb. She said, you were so passionate about what you believe. She says, I'll never forget that. So I don't know how that spoke to her, but that's what happens in group therapy when you do a psychodrama. You never know what is going to come out of it, what is going to be the result. So I just want to share that with you because I thought that was a really pretty cool way to do a psychodrama with a biblical perspective, biblical twist to it. Again, if you're going to lead a group, whether it's psychodrama or another type of therapy group, you have to have training for it. Because it's so powerful, you don't know what's going to be tapped into in someone's heart, in someone's life. And so if you as a therapist need to be prepared to make some kind of therapeutic intervention if somebody begins to become, say, dysregulated emotionally and need help. So anyway, just wanted to share that part with you. Now I want to share with you about a topic, it's called universality. And this is something that I was having a conversation with a few of you about this past week. And that's the idea that we are comforted by the idea of being in a setting where other people have gone through what we have gone through, or they think like we think, or they feel the same way that we feel. And a group setting really exemplifies that. It intensifies the sense of needing to know that you're not alone in whatever it is you're going through. So universality, just make sure you know this for your exam, it refers to the idea that we do share many traits with our fellow human being. And when you're in a group, you are connecting to people based on similar experiences or similar thoughts, similar emotions, and that in itself can be very healing. I'm going to share an experience with you where I was counseling a group in a private practice, and this is actually a practice in which most of our work came from the courts. And the people who were being sent to us were mandated by the courts for a drug or alcohol related offense. So we had this program where we did 8 sessions of group counseling, and this was content counseling. I talked about that with some of you in the discussion boards this week. Content counseling is when it's topical. It has to do with generally psychoeducation. So, for example, we had quite a few things that we would teach about, and they were always kind of had a drug or alcohol related theme to them, but they weren't necessarily teaching about drugs that day. So, for example, I might talk about how to deal with, becoming angry. How do you deal with anger? How do you deal with loneliness? Things like that. And drugs, tend to get involved in those situations where people have strong emotions. So anyway, this was an 8-week group that we had people coming in and out of all the time. It was an open group, meaning that you could start the group at any time and complete 8 sessions. And a closed group is where you start a group at one date, and everybody that you're going to have comes in at that date, and no one else could come in once the group starts. So that's not the kind of thing that we were doing there, but I just wanted to give you some information about that. So this group, every time someone new would be coming in, I would do an intake. And this would be an individual session, maybe for about 30, 45 minutes. and, talking to them about what their charge was with the courts, why they had been sent to us, and letting them know about this. This is the pre-group phase where I'm letting them know what our group is about. Most of them had never had any experience with groups, like most people don't. So giving them a lot of information, addressing any concerns, any questions, letting them know that I understood if they had some, apprehension about joining a group. And then at that time, I was also assessing them. So this is where, Irving Yalom, Dr. Yalom, he talks about how it's easier to, when you're selecting a group, it's easier to bring people in than it is to do the deselection, or to have people decide you don't want to have them in the group. And the reason for that is when you've got a short time to interview someone for a group, you can't always tell how they are going to respond in a group setting. Dealing with somebody in a one-on-one session is very different than dealing with them in a whole group of people. So Dr. Yalom's point was there are certain people that are not suitable for groups. And when you catch that in someone at the time of your intake, then you know that they're not appropriate. But a lot of times people will slip through into the group because you've only had 45 minutes or so to interview them, and everything seemed like it was going to be fine, and it's not until they get into the group that you realize, this person maybe was a good fit. Now, in a content-oriented group, the truth is most people will probably be okay in a content group because it's a lot of education. And you're not doing a process group, which is where the focus of the group is about the relationships right there in the group. And in those settings, you have transference come up, you have all kinds of previous life experiences that you start to play out with somebody there in the room, somebody who reminds you of someone who really hurt you, and then you start acting on that there in the group and the way that you're speaking with them. So that's very different, and you really need to be careful in your screening process when you're doing process groups, which is what Dr. Yalom is. That's the type of group that he does as a process group. So I want to just try to make that differentiation between a content and a process group. I'm not going to quiz you about that because that's really kind of more on of a advanced group information, but I'm giving it to you just FYI. And so when I was selecting people, there were only a few that I ever deselected because most people I figured they could do fine in a group setting. I talked about one of the women who I deselected in our discussion board, and there was somebody else who I thought had a psychotic process who I didn't think was really good for group process. Psychosis, if you don't know what that is where you maybe see things that aren't there, or you hear things that aren't there, or you might have delusions where you're not thinking in terms of reality. Those kind of people don't work well in a group setting because they disarm, or they get in the way of the group. Other people become too distracted by that person and what they're dealing with. Now, that being said, I want to say that I used to also work in a day treatment program where everyone had some form of a serious mental illness. And these were people who they could barely, most of them didn't hold a job. They lived in some kind of an assisted living environment. And then they would walk to our clinic every day, 5 days a week. And we would have all kinds of things for them: individual therapy, group therapy, daily living tasks. We had a kitchen there. We taught them how to cook, and we would talk about hygiene, things like that. So we did have groups. They were never process groups, but they were different topical groups, like how to deal with your landlord, how to get on the bus and ride through the town and get to your destination, how to deal with somebody if they were angry with you, things like that. I even did a progressive relaxation group with them, which was really awesome. And if you don't know what progressive relaxation is, I recommend that you look it up. And there are kinds some are kind of weird, kind of like Middle Eastern. You don't need to look into those because they have a religious overtone. But there are others that really are it's just about relaxing your body. It's got nothing to do with, you know, any Eastern mysticism. I encourage you to stay away from that. So, anyway, even though they had serious mental illness, they were able and suitable to be a part of the type of groups that we were structuring. So when you're doing content groups, let's say you're going to lead a content group on anxiety, well, you're going to have people who are anxious when they come in, and you're going to, you know, be working on that and talking about that. And that's okay. Or they're depressed, and that's great to have groups for depression. That's a very common type of a group to have, where you're teaching skills and then you're helping people talk about their experiences. And then again, universality plays a big role in those groups as well, because people are listening to other people talk about their experiences being depressed, and they're like, wow, I'm not alone. Thank God. I thought I was the only one who ever didn't want to get out of bed every day. And it's very powerful. So in that group that I worked in with the mandated counseling, we also had an exit interview for every client who went through the group. And during that time, I would ask various questions like, you know, what did you think of the group? Did you benefit from the group? If you did, why? If you didn't, why? What were your 3 favorite topics that I taught about? What did you like most about the group? What did you like least? So here's something that I found very interesting. Almost without fail, every person would say what they liked the most was hearing from other people in the room. They liked knowing they weren't alone. They liked knowing how people are handling things in life. It gave them some ideas. So the group in and of itself was more powerful probably than some of the things that I ever taught about. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I think, again, I said in the first class that, you know, the power of group is something way different than individual therapy offers. And so if you are going to be a counselor, I think it would be really important that you get maybe some extra training in groups, and then make that part of your repertoire. Have that part of your practice wherever you are, if that's possible. Okay, I think that covers it. And again, I just want to thank you so much for your great interactions. I really appreciated you, and I hope you have a great week.